Hi everybody, it's the Ultimate Rabbit. I really enjoyed doing my commentary track for Pump Up the Volume, and I'm here with another one, but this time it's going to be for a TV show, namely one of my favorite TV shows of all time, let alone of the 1990s, Homicide, Life on the Street. We're going to be looking at its premiere episode entitled Gone for Good. I'll share my thoughts and other things and also some facts behind the episode. I'm assuming you all are queued up on your DVD player for this track, that you have you're ready to press play at any time. Currently, this series is not available to stream on any digital platform, mainly probably because of the music rights, and that's understandable. But if you have the A&E DVD set or the Shout Factory DVD set, you're probably already ready. So we're going to start by clicking on play. Here we go. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And here we go. We open up on Clark Johnson as Mildred Lewis and John Polito as Steve Grassetti. The dialogue they mention here, if I could just find this thing, I go home. Life is a mystery. These are lines of dialogue that are repeated in the final episode of the series by Clark Johnson and Michael Michelle. I was really excited to check this out because Barry Levinson had produced the show. Whenever a noted filmmaker decides to enter TV, I'm like, okay, this has got to be interesting because perhaps they can provide something different than what other people do. The scene where they're observing the body at a crime scene really hooked me in because it just felt real. This felt like reality. And in a time where reality television keeps getting into our minds or into the public consciousness, I'm reminded of how, reality has a different connotation. Reality television doesn't strike me as reality. It strikes me as controlled reality. But this series, at least in its first season, felt very much real. And especially as they approach the dead body here, And we're coming up here. Polito's line there is wonderfully ironic because he says this job has nothing to do with life. And the show is all about life. It's not about death. It's about life and how people approach it. And we're coming up to the opening titles, which played throughout the first 4 seasons. Filmmaker Mark Pellington did these. I really dig these opening credit sequences because, and apparently he shot them with an 8mm film, and it captures the tone of the series perfectly. And I love these sort of like little images of the main characters throughout. It's very clever. And the theme song of the show was done by Lynn Cowell, who is a Peabody winner. Her music was selected for the theme because to the producers, Barry Levinson and Tom Fontana, it sounded so different than any other theme they got, because most of the themes they got were the typical kind of cop show themes, and this one was different. Created by Paul Antanasio. Apparently, some people dispute that. They think Tom Fontana should be credited as the creator of the show, and that kind of makes sense. And this is well with respect to Mr. Antanasio, who did, in fact, write the teleplay for this episode, Gone for Good. And did a great job. This is a great episode in terms of how it introduces the characters. And this was made clear also by Richard Belzer, a.k.a. John Munch. May he rest in peace, by the way. It's interesting to see this. I didn't watch the show right away. I actually just kept taping a lot of episodes, which turned to be a mistake because I taped a lot of stuff thinking, hey, I'll watch it later eventually, and a lot of times I don't, but in this case, I think it was New Year's Eve one year, and I finally said, well, to kill time before the clock reaches midnight, let's just let me just watch this, and one of the best decisions I made. You know, Yaphet Kotto, may he also rest in peace, is introducing Bayless to, the box and the fishbowl, which later really became known as the aquarium. And of course, there's the board where red cases are open and black cases are closed. And it's a reminder of how beautiful black is as a color. I got a kick out of this, Yaphet Kotto I'd seen in Alien and a couple other things. Kyle Secor, he had one of the most enviable roles in a television series, as he came in as a rookie. His character of Tim Bayless came in as a rookie, and he got to develop his character from season to season, where he would start off being hopelessly naive and became quite the veteran. There's a lot to be said for that. That's a very enviable role in a television show. And we're coming up here to first appearance of Richard Belzer as Munch, and Ned Beatty, also may he rest in peace, as Stanley Bolander. And also we got Steve Harris, who would later go on to play a lawyer in The Practice, who became a judge later on. It's interesting to see him here in this. I remember my parents bought me a book one time by Belzer called How to Be a Stand-Up Comedian. That book was my first introduction to Belzer. So it was a kick to see him here, and I love the dialogue he has here, who is just wonderfully cynical, to where he's like, I'm not Montel Williams. I love that line. It's a line he would kind of paraphrase in an episode of The X-Files several years later, where he's like, don't lie to me like Geraldo. I'm not Geraldo. You know what I mean? I love the camera work. I love that it was done handheld. It makes it feel all the more real. And it was shot on film. Today it might just be shot on digital, but seeing it shot on film gives it a reality that it wouldn't otherwise have. And I think, the thing about this show that was so great is how, David Simon said, the big lie of homicide detectives is how they just go over to a crime scene, look at the body, and said, oh God, what a waste, what a shame. But with these detectives here, the violence is just another day for them. And it's understandable. You kind of have to keep a distance. We keep talking about how dangerous being a cop is physically, but this show is a reminder of how dangerous it is psychologically. And this will remain the case from one season to the next of Homicide. It's not every day you got to talk to a witness who got shot in the head. Poor thing. And we're coming up to a moment where Steve Grassetti talks about the Lincoln assassination, and it's a running gag for this character as he keeps wondering what the truth was about it. Was it a conspiracy? And a lot of people talk about conspiracies. Munch talks about conspiracies on this show. It's kind of funny because I think it's clear that John Wilkes Booth assassinated Lincoln, but you can understand why Grassetti likes to keep wondering about it, Not everything about these characters are revealed right away. It's kind of like, with them, it's like they're kind of peeling different layers of an onion throughout each episode, where we get to reveal more things, we get to learn more things about these characters as life goes on, When Tom Fontana was invited to be part of the show, he said Barry Levinson told him he wanted to do a cop show without violence. And he's like, that's insane. Where do I sign up, And the first season, the first two seasons, and part of the third season, that was an interesting point because, we didn't see a lot of violence in the show. Once it was introduced, it proved to be a shocking effect. But it kept being introduced, more of the violence kept getting introduced into the show, the less meaningful it became, I have to say. And Baltimore is a major character on this show. And Melissa Leo there as Kay Howard, one of the greatest female detectives in either television or cinematic history. You know, this was my introduction to her as an actress. She had done a lot of work before that, but I didn't really know her before that, and I love that. And I love her hair as does everybody else. And Daniel Baldwin as Beau Felton is probably still the best work he's ever done as an actor, this side of John Carpenter's Vampires. And you know there's a dead body when there's a bunch of flies flying all over the place. I like this scene here because it's like they're talking about a dead body, but the conversation goes elsewhere. Like he's talking about, Beau Felton's talking about furniture. I think that's just the first thing he goes to. You know, oh, what a shame this guy's dead. No, they're not interested in that. The only thing they're interested in is closing the case. If they're not interested, Lieutenant Giardello, played by Yaphet Kotto, is going to be quick to remind him of that. Ex-husband Jerry Jepson. We will later meet him, but kind of love how Felton reacts to Kay Howard getting lucky with this case, and how things just sort of fall into her lap. And the board. It's interesting. Now they have markers that actually work. It's interesting watching Munch and Bolander here. They seem to have sort of a close professional relationship, but as the episodes would go on, it'd be quite the opposite. You know what I mean? It's like Bolander's like, I can't stand Munch, and it's understandable why he can't. Oh, this is a great line here. I love this. It's our coffee, yeah. It's interesting to note how the network initially wanted Jason Priestley to play John Munch and not Belzer. And Belzer, if you listen to Belzer's comedy album, Another Lone Mutt, he talks about that. He talks about how Levinson and Fontana put a gun to Bob Wright's head and hired him. And the network's like, but he's not handsome. I don't care. We want him. No. We want Jason Priestley. No, you're going to get that skinny Jew. Okay. NBC. I mean, the way Belzer saw it, you know, homicide detectives are the masters of black humor or gallows humor. And I think in a sense they have to be, considering what they see on a regular basis. And a lot of people say, you know, you got to think about the victim. You got to think about that. But you know, we only see that rarely, if ever, and these guys see it every single day. Elmore Leonard quality, I love that. I love the descriptions Belzer comes up with throughout this series. And then we're at the bar. It's interesting, and this is the first time we learn about Frank Pendleton, who's played by Andre Braugher. We don't see him right away, but they bring up how, you know, he is kind of a rogue on the squad because he's never around, and he doesn't want to partner with anybody. And you see Giardello with the detectives at lunch, which is not always the case. As seasons go on, you know, Giardello is not always willing to go to parties with his fellow detectives. Sometimes he does, sometimes he doesn't. And when he does go to parties, like, I really don't want to be here, you know. And they're smashing the crabs and all that. High Noon. That's a movie I still need to see, believe it or not. That will probably end up on I haven't seen it until now list of movies I review. Oh, that's great. I'm not sure what restaurant this is. I did actually visit Baltimore several years ago to visit a friend of mine who I used to work with in Los Angeles. And one of the joys of going there was visiting the building where the Homicide police department was filmed in Fells Point. I got to touch it and everything. I got to touch the building. I mean, I didn't get to go inside because it was locked, but it's probably just as well because probably everything inside was long since taken down. The sets have been struck and everything, I'm sure. Baltimore is a huge character on the show, as I'm sure you already know. Everybody's looking to duck the check on Homicide. Kind of a reminder of how underpaid police detectives or police officers are in general, which is a shame. When Fontana was brought on the show, you didn't think there would ever be as realistic a cop show on television as Hill Street Blues. After all these years, I still have yet to watch a single episode of Hill Street Blues, so I need to do that. And here we come up on Frank Pembleton, played by the great Andre Braugher, who would later prove to be the breakout star of the show. I wasn't familiar with Braugher's work before this. I mean, his most significant role probably was in the Civil War film Glory, which is an amazing film, by the way. I couldn't recommend more highly. And I love just how he kind of introduces himself. Look, hey, I got this, okay? I have a lot of black under my name. You got nothing to worry about. Blue. This is interesting. I mean, he's about to partner up with Bo Felton, which is the last person Pembleton should be partnered up with, you know. I mean, I got to say Baldwin's portrayal of Felton is especially commendable because this is a character who, in other words, might be seen as deliberately racist, but I don't think Felton is a racist. I think he's raised differently, sees things differently, and it's easy to call him out on certain things because he doesn't always think about what he's saying. And we would see this in later episodes. He's a bit of a jerk, but Baldwin here really kind of makes him a respectable jerk, if you know what I mean. And this is a great introduction to the character of Pembleton when he realizes, oh, he forgot the number. And his determination is just to find this car with just the key. And it's a key to the character. Because, obviously, if he needs to knock through 1,000 doors to find a suspect or close a case, he's going to knock down all those doors. And that would be the case from here on out. And of course, Pembleton is quick to try to get rid of Felton, but Felton's like, no. And his frustration with Pembleton is not based on race in the slice. It's based on the fact that as a homicide detective, he feels like he doesn't even compare to Pembleton. And here we see the detectives driving along. This is how they would usually be filmed, from the back seat. I love how he talks about how Montel Williams got a talk show because he had connections in the show business. I guess that is the way it usually happens, isn't it? And apparently the Cavaliers that the detectives had on this show, the Baltimore City Police Department ended up selling all of these Cavaliers to the production team on Homicide for $1. And they sold them dozens of cars, but apparently only 2 of them were drivable. Ned Beatty is probably the most recognizable face at the time when the show aired. And he's one of those actors, it's like you don't wonder what he was in it, you wonder what he wasn't in. He was in everything, be it Superman, the movie, Deliverance, I mean, you name it. Deliverance was his first movie and probably his most famous one for all the right or wrong reasons. I am not going upstairs. I love the way Brower speaks. I mean, this is kind of the thing. It kind of touches on, some people are openly racist. Some people don't realize the prejudices that they hold. And I don't think, Felton is not openly prejudiced person. He just, he makes you wonder about things, as Pemberton does. And his resentment is understandable, having watched this show several times. Whether it's justified or not is up for discussion. I am not going upstairs. I love this, at least they wrote down the number. They know which car they need to go into. A lot of detectives drive sports cars. These detectives are understandably forced to drive economy cars, because God forbid they have to spend that much money on their detectives. And here they're talking to the witness again, and this is a witness whose aunt is Calpurnia Church, a character who would later become prominent in a future episode. We learn she is quite devious, especially when it comes to life insurance. If things seem too weird to be true, they're not on this show. And this character here has not only been shot in the head once, but twice. Too crazy to be true? Not necessarily. This show, of course, is based on the nonfiction book by David Simon called Homicide, A Year on the Killing Streets. The show ended up being called Homicide, Life on the Street, because the term life on the street seemed a lot more life-affirming. It makes sense, And Tom Fontana, Barry Levinson, and everybody involved in the show treated the book as the Bible of the show. All the things you see here are from the book, but this series is not a literal adaptation of the novel. I love to praise him. And they're still looking for the damn car. There's a lot of smoking on this show. Say what you will about that. I imagine a lot of that's the result of just, smoking does look cool on screen, and just these homicide detectives. And it's just a way of controlling it. Although future episodes would show them dealing with their smoking happens in different ways. And of course, people are not quick to take Bayless seriously because he came from the mayor's task force, because he knew that would get him to homicide. And of course, people are not quick to see him as an equal. But he would quickly become an equal in a few episodes. What book is he holding in his hand? That's a good question. I don't. Where could he see his first dead guy? And now these detectives are going to exhume a body. And I love this guy here. I don't have his name in front of me. I apologize. I'm usually pretty quick to have the actors' names in front of me, but he was a local hire, and just I love his voice. I love the way he talks about the people Calpurnia Church is had buried. Throws around nickels like manhole covers. And these guys are about to exhume a body. You need an atom bomb to get her in here. Sad but true. Funny but true, yeah. And of course, styrofoam. Styrofoam, yeah. This is a guy who deals with death and has to have a bit of a sense of humor about it, and understandably so. Alright. That's why some people decide to get cremated instead of buried. Now this scene here is a bit emotional, as these detectives Munch and Bolander are interviewing the parents of Jenny Goode, trying to find, more to go on in their case. This is a cold case they're dealing with. A lot of people are probably like, why aren't the parents more emotional? I think at this point, to deal with a loss that I would not even wish on my worst enemy, they've kind of shut down, and understandably so. But this also brings a point of how people like to put out rewards for people who have any information. The problem is, you put that reward out, it draws out people with a serious cash flow problem. And they'll tell you anything you want to hear. And that's just about everybody I know, by the way. I mean, everybody's got a cash flow problem. They're trying to help, but, quite frankly, it brings a lot of work on the detectives they don't have to deal with. And this scene is always heartrending here with the daughter. Yeah. I don't like the way he's laying. So here we got rookie Tim Bayliss is getting his first look at a dead body, and he seems to be handling it pretty well. And we only see the dead body for like a couple of seconds. And after that, it kind of just becomes a piece of furniture of sorts. It's more about the person who killed the man that we're looking at. That character seems to get a little more precedence. Bayliss wants to prove to everybody he's not as dumb as he looks. But that doesn't always work out. I mean, Kyle Secor, I didn't really know of him before the show, but I did realize later that he did appear in a movie I loved when I was younger called City Slickers. He was one of the ranch hands who was not exactly the nicest guy. I love how Pendleton and Bayliss are sort of put together. And Giardello wants Howard to work with Bayliss, but they got other ideas, and more importantly, these two end up together by accident, but it's a wonderful accident, as later episodes would show, as they work off of each other quite well. And now we're at the morgue where the detectives go. And apparently the first season or two, they actually filmed at a real morgue to where the actors were really getting gross. The smell was terrible. I'm sure it was. To where, I remember what Michelle Forbes said when she first appeared as Juliana Cox. Yeah, formaldehyde, you never get used to it. I love the reality, but I can see why the actors are like, seriously, we don't need to deal with it. This is too much, Perhaps so, And by the way, we're coming up to the introduction of a recurring character, an actor who has been in many of Barry Levinson's films. Ralph Tabakin, right there. I probably didn't get his name right. I apologize. He plays Dr. Shiner. And he would be a constant presence throughout the show. A welcome presence. Barry Levinson kept calling Ralph his Lucky Charm. And that must be the case. That was the case through a lot of his films. Probably even Toys. A film that was a critical commercial bomb when it came up, but probably is nowhere as bad as people make it out to be. One of my friends, who was also named Ben, called it one of the most powerful anti-war movies he ever saw. I love this graveyard guy. He's hilarious. Yeah, baby, hey, what are you gonna do? John Polito has also been gone. A wonderful character actor. He was the first main cast member to leave the show under unfortunate circumstances. But he was in a lot of great movies outside of this, be it The Crow or Barton Fink or Miller's Crossing, you know. And then when it comes to the homicide unit, the dress code is always the same. A suit and a tie, and somehow Felton always gets away with not wearing a tie. Jerry Jemison, here he is. Apparently, a lot of the scenes with Jerry Jemison that we're about to see in the box were completely improvised. And this is one of the first real examples of the jump cutting that Barry Levinson introduced. I think this was done because, as this was a show that was going to be a police show without gun violence, at least initially, the jump cutting was meant to make certain moments more psychologically exciting. And I love how it's filmed here. And all the characters here, the actors that were Baltimore locals, look wonderfully real, and I appreciated that. You know. I love it. We never see how she extracts a confession from Jerry Jemison, but that's okay. It doesn't really matter. Because the man really pretty much shot himself in the foot. No. Baltimore's a big character on the show, and so are the actors who guest star on it, you know. I love it. He says, no, but hey, I can get you this, no problem. The first season, the look was drained of its colors, which was interesting. It's almost black and white. As the show went on, more color was introduced. I mean, the compromises the producers had to make on the show, I think, were inevitable, because there's only so much you can get away with innovation on a television show on network television. If this were like a cable show, it would be different, you know. But what are you going to do, you know? Roy Scheider, I remember once talking about how movies went out of their way to make characters exciting in a way that was necessary, because in real life police work is quite boring or filled with paperwork. And it's probably true. But the way this show is constructed, it's very exciting and feels new and much more real than your average reality show, as I just said. See that TV? They don't make TVs like that anymore. Vending machines, they probably do, but TVs like that, no. It's all high definition. And I like how Munch comes across this one suspect that he didn't see right away. It's a black and white photo, but he does notice something different. Exactly. It is indeed. Good question. Yep, shake his tree, all right. That's a black Trans Am. And they're not about to let this guy off the hook. These Baltimore row houses, there's something about them that feels unique, you know, to Baltimore, let alone Maryland. Maybe there are other states that have these kind of row houses, but these ones feel real. When it came time to turn David Simon's book of Homicide into a series, they understandably went to Barry Levinson, because anything Baltimore related went to him. And they wanted him to turn it into a movie, but his take was it would make more sense as a television show, because you would get to see these characters' lives more in depth, and you would see them develop over time. And that was a brilliant move. Homicide was never a big ratings hit, but it did last for 7 seasons and 1 television movie. For the record, when this show was canceled, I was in tears. I've never cried over a show being canceled before, but I absolutely cried over this one. So this case is closed, and he's picking up the phone. I wonder, is he calling the parents to let them know, hey, we got the killer? And we're coming up to a significant scene for Bolander, at least in the very first season, you know. And here we go with Wendy Hughes, Dr. Carol Blythe. She has since passed on. She is missed. And I love her line there. Yeah, looking for Mr. Right. Yeah. On a job like that makes sense. And Bolander is initially intrigued. I mean, we'll later find in future episodes that, you know, he has been divorced and is sort of facing the repercussions of that. And now here we come with Chris said he's going out of his way to go after Lewis for his salami brain comment. Polito was a great character actor. It's a shame he left the show the way he did, but I'm glad that despite his anger over being dismissed, NBC wanted him gone because of his physical appearance, which says way more about the network than I ever will about Polito. But it's great to see that they made peace, that Polito made peace with Fontana and Levinson before he passed away, and he did appear in the Homicide TV movie, which was great. This is great. I mean, Melissa Leo in the first season or 2 did wear makeup, but as time went on, she opted not to. She wanted to be treated like one of the guys, because Kate Howard wanted to be treated like one of the guys, and that made sense. That made perfect sense. To simply label her as a female detective would be completely unfair. Now, apparently the character Frank Pembleton was based on, I don't have his name in front of me, but he argued that he would never have ordered milk the way Pembleton does. Well, you know, when you're adapting a novel to film or television, it never can be a literal adaptation. You kind of just have to go with the flow and see what comes out. And when he says, can I quote you on it? He talks about how crime makes you stupid. And this is something that's repeated throughout the series by various characters, and especially Pembleton. Especially Bayless, I should say. He makes clear, yeah, crime makes you stupid. And it does, doesn't it? I mean, there is, you know, Munch in later episodes would mention that how dumb criminals are a gift from God. Now, we come out to another character here who's played by, let me see if I get his name right. But I want to get his right. And then again, this jump cutting is great because it makes his subsequent arrest. His name is Johnny. He's played by Alexander Chaplin, who would later go on to appear on the sitcom Spin City. And Pembleton's talking about the rules, and the rules seem to go all over the place. But yeah, you know, sometimes he's too awake, too cooperative, not cooperative enough, whatever you got to say, you know. I love this dialogue that Andre has and the way he delivers it. It took me a while to realize just how powerful a presence Andre Braugher is. I say this because this is an ensemble show where no star is supposed to be bigger than the other, but it's completely understandable how Andre Braugher became the breakout star of Homicide: Life on the Street, because while other actors treated their characters like, you know, ordinary homicide detectives, Brower treated Pendleton as though he was an avenger for God. And now we're about to see him in his first interrogation scene, which is historic, among other things. I love this box set. I would love to have visited it. When it came to season 7, they completely reconfigured this set, which was both understandable and somewhat unfortunate. It offers a secret, and it's never the suspect's brand. And it's interesting how Pendleton says he sees his job as a homicide detective as being kind of like a car salesman, or a used car salesman to be more specific, in which he's about to sell the suspect something that he has no real use for, in this case a long prison sentence. And at this moment, Pendleton coolly gets this suspect to give up his Miranda rights, which might seem unfair and cruel, but as the show goes on, you see why they do that. It's not about fairness, it's about closing the case. And I love when he slams his hand on the desk like, damn, And that's what they always tell suspects. Look, you can get a lawyer, but once you do, I will not be in a position to help you. Another big cop show at the time was NYPD Blue, which is not as good as Homicide, but on its own, I really liked that show as well, and how it treated police work. But this one felt more real and more unique. After watching this episode, I couldn't stop watching the other episodes. I also got to say that, when it came to Three Men and Adina, which would come later, I could not tear my eyes from the screen. And this became a show that I really rooted for. I really wanted it to continue, and it did. If this show were on any other network, it would not have lasted 7 seasons, sad to say. I'm tempted to say it would have if it was on ABC, but NYPD Blue was a little more flashy and dealt with different techniques to where it's understandable how it could have attracted more viewers than Homicide. Now here, Pendleton is getting the suspect to tell him what he wants to hear. Yeah, that's okay. Yeah, he did that. And that's the trap, Chaplin is great here. He's so wonderfully nervous. And Bayless at this point is like, hey, what are you doing? You're robbing this suspect of his rights. But I imagine a lot of these homicide detectives, when they come to suspects like these, they already know they're guilty and they want them to confess. Pendleton uses his words very carefully. Yeah, he was there at the time of death. And he says it very specifically. He said to make sure the suspect hears it. You look into his eyes, there's no escape. Does the autopsy prove it? Doesn't matter. But he's telling Johnny things that he would not know. He wouldn't know anything about autopsies. The quivering of the lips there by him or any other actor, I imagine that's got to be hard to pull off unless you really are upset. There's something to be said for that. And now Bayless is like, you can't do that. That's not fair. And Pendleton is basically saying, no, this is not fair. It's not meant to be fair. It's about closing the case. What book is he holding? I want to know what book Bayless is holding. If you know, just provide a comment and feel free to comment, because I can tell from this angle. He's going to go to jail, but yeah, he's probably going to find a way to decrease his time in prison. It's no wonder Andre Braugher became the breakout star on the show. You know, with all the death and dark moments these homicide detectives have to deal with, it's a wonder, why more of them don't commit suicide. It's, again, psychologically, this is a minefield. And I think it's understandable. A lot of people say you shouldn't joke over a corpse, but I think these guys have to, because that's the only way you can deal with it. There a lot of people saying, you have to deal with death. You gotta sad. It's not that people aren't sad. It's not that they don't care. It's that they have to have some sort of distance from it. Otherwise, they will go nuts. And these detectives often are talking about, how can I get out of this line of work? But the problem is, they're cops. They can't be anything else. And as much as they want to, there's always something that brings them back. And we're coming up on a key scene here that actually was taken directly from the book. I remember reading the book, and I'm like, oh, wow, this really did happen. We're going to come up to it in a second. Involving the guy who just came into the corner, and these detectives know what this guy is up to. He's going to try to rob them. And of course, they're talking about diapers, and they're talking about Madonna's sex book. Wow, this was a long time ago this show came out. And this guy here is clearly looking to rob these three guys or someone else. Now, this line that Belzer has saying here was taken directly from the book, and I can't help but laugh at it even more here. And now we're coming up to the last moment on this episode, in which Bayless accepts his first call as a detective. And it's a case that will come to define the show in many ways. The murder of Adina Watson. This was a murder that was dealt with in Simon's book. And I'm reminded of when Giardello would tell other detectives, you never get your first murdered child. And Bayless would never forget this one. I mean, this case would haunt him throughout the series. And the credits: Brad Livingston, Tom Fontana, executive producers. I mean, this episode hooked me in right away. And when I came to watching the second episode, I figured, okay, this is when the series is going to fall apart. But Livingston set a strong visual benchmark for the show that other directors had to follow, and rightfully so. I mean, you can't go overboard in innovation when it comes to this show. And from there, it was quite the ride. So that's my take on Gone for Good, the first episode of Homicide: Life on the Street. And hopefully we get to do this again on future episodes. I love the show, and I love watching it. I love talking about it. I hope you enjoyed this commentary. This is the Ultimate Rabbit signing off.